Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Anchored podcast. My name is Laura Deneen. I am your host for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us on the show. If you are new to this platform, we really are about two things on this podcast. We often talk about some of the pain and suffering that happens in our own lives and that we see in our clients' lives. And then we also talk about the hope that is there. And so we have the amazing privilege of sitting with clients on a daily basis, and I just cherish that work. I know Lauren does as well, and we just are so grateful to our clients for showing up and doing the hard work. And so we're here to share some of the wisdom that we have learned over the years as therapists. If you are local to Tennessee, we would love to work with you. And if you're not local, we encourage you to find someone local to you if you are wanting support for your mental health. I'm super excited for today's episode. I'm going to be joined by one of our staff therapists at Anchored Counseling Co., Heidi Hensley. She has been with us a little over a year. She's amazing. Today we're going to be talking about how acceptance facilitates healing. Such a wonderful topic. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Of course, yeah. So acceptance, that's a big topic.
And I think it's something that is in most every part of your life.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
It's something that you can find in everything. Like we were joking earlier about how I was angry that it's raining. Well, I need to accept that I don't have control over the weather. But like there's acceptance in all kinds of areas of your life, and I think that it's a big part of this idea of growth. And so how do I heal and grow and find peace in life is something that I think a lot of people are looking for. And acceptance is a part of all of that. I don't know if everybody knows that or identifies it as that, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, and for those of you listening, Heidi really is an expert in many different areas within a clinical setting. She works quite frequently with OCD, anxiety, eating disorder presentations, and specifically in that realm, I think acceptance can be just such a beautiful and such an integral part of treatment. Mm-hmm. And in today's episode, we're talking about how it does facilitate healing. Mm-hmm. And so, I love the example of what you used about the rain, and it really has been raining here. We actually got some really big hail last night.
Yeah.
And it was quite scary. I mean, we stayed inside, and then once it finished, we ran outside to make sure that our cars were okay. I mean, it was the biggest hail I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And trying to explain it to our 2.5-year-old daughter was a little bit interesting. So anyway, I totally hear what you mean with the rain.
But it's a good point that maybe if it rains for one day, it wouldn't be hard for me to accept.
Yep.
But now that it's rained every weekend, the whole month, now I'm having a harder time accepting it. But I have to continue to come back to that. I have to continue to realize how much my lack of acceptance is playing a role in my own unhappiness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, tell me this, Heidi. When you are working with a client, I'd love to hear how you explain what acceptance is and what it isn't.
I think this is a topic that we might have a conversation about 10 times over. It might come up over and over again because the word acceptance is something I think everybody has heard and they understand. But when it applies to certain things that are emotional for us, it can feel like other things that aren't true. So the rain is like a funny joke. It's it's true, but it's not an emotional thing for me. It's the weather. It has nothing to do with anything I think about myself or my relationship to the weather. When we start to talk about things that are more emotional for certain people, acceptance can feel like things like giving up. It can feel like I don't care. And when those things aren't true about the situation and acceptance feels like it, we have a hard time moving towards acceptance. So it's a conversation about acceptance is not those things. It's not giving up. It's not resigning yourself to the fact that you like what's happening. But it does allow you to then move forward in the reality that you have. So that is a conversation that while we could have written it down and talk about the vocabulary of it, what makes acceptance hard and why we have to continue to reorient ourselves towards the times that we're getting away from it is a different conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 questions that came up for me as you were chatting just now. So number one, I think this point, well, I guess not questions, but points after what you shared, right? This point of like a continual orienting, right? We don't just arrive at acceptance and we're there forever and ever and ever. Right. So I think there's acceptance around the fact that acceptance is hard.
Yes.
Right. And then I would love for you to share perhaps a specific example of something beyond the reign. So maybe something that you've heard in a clinical setting or maybe something pertinent to your own life where someone may be struggling to accept something.
I think when there's a loss, acceptance is something that a lot of people talk about because it's, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross created these 5 stages of grief, and it's the last one. So we all think, let's just get to the last one, and then I'll be grieved. I grieved the best. I did it all. And so
even your posture, you're like, I did it.
Yeah. I'm a perfectionist and I grieved wonderfully. So I think that there's already this idea in a lot of people's heads that acceptance is a part of grief. But when we think about grief and loss in a way that isn't death, then acceptance gets a little bit muddier. So like the loss of a relationship, that can be hard for some people to accept because they struggle with this idea, which I think we try to press on here humanistically. We all do. We all struggle with this idea that acceptance means that I'm giving up on this relationship, either coming back together and being reconciled, or I'm giving up hope that it can get better, or I'm acting like I don't care and that's not how I should act. So all these ideas, that's what I mean when like acceptance gets muddy, about these ideas of what does acceptance mean about me? It means I don't care. And that is where like the logic gets flawed and emotional. So I think that where I see it come up for people in my sessions is around this idea of loss that isn't necessarily death-based, but something that can still adapt and change. That person still exists in this world, and yet our relationship is strained or lost, and I have a hard time accepting that.
Yeah, so a shift of some kind, or perhaps a loss or a change in expectation is what I'm hearing you refer to. Yeah. And acceptance is, I see it come up in my sessions specifically when I'm working with clients with anxiety or OCD, because typically with those presentations, there's a desire for certainty. And I think a lot of times when we're working with acceptance beyond grief, right, or beyond a loss or a change of expectation, the acceptance that there's a lot that is really out of our control.
Yes.
Right? And a lot of life that is really out of our control, and a lot that we can't predict, and a lot that will happen to us and the people that we love that we are not able to determine ahead of time.
Yes.
And so especially for our clients that tend to have anxious temperaments or struggle with anxiety and or OCD, that can be a huge part of the work is acceptance in that regard.
Yeah, and I think the acceptance around uncertainty, the acceptance around, this is what I hear you saying, that there's a level of acceptance that needs to happen around not having a solution to all of life's problems.
Yeah.
That you don't have the resolution. And that creates an anxiety, that creates an impatience in us, that there are things in this life that we want to protect and be sure about, and learning that that's not possible and accepting that reality about life, that might be something you reorient yourself to over and over and over again.
Yeah. Well, and it's so hard, right? Like, I have so much compassion for clients and even empathy with lived experience in this regard of, like, wanting to have answers, right? And wanting to know. Like, and what we'll hear from clients in our office, and I think this is a quite common experience for folks, is like, I just want to know, Laura. Yeah. Like, my trials and tribulations wouldn't be as painful if I just knew. And so what we see is that struggle against the acceptance, right? And I'm using my hands if you're listening today, but it's a struggle, I think, against the acceptance itself. And there's this desire and this churning, I think, in us as humans to want to know and to want to have all the answers.
And I think we get stuck there. A lot of times that's what impedes our ability to get to the next step, which is oftentimes growth or healing or coping. If we're stuck with, how do I accept that this is true, that this is the way that it is?
Yeah, that I'm not going to know.
That I can't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think when Heidi's talking about individuals getting stuck there, right? Like, we see this show up in lots of different ways, right? There's not just one way it shows up. Maybe an individual comes to us and they've spent the entirety of their lives worrying, right? And they've maybe justified the worrying by saying something to themselves like, if I just worry enough, then I'll be able to prevent harm from coming to myself or my loved ones.
Yes.
Or I'll be able to convince myself that I'm not a bad person, right? So there's all sorts of ways that struggling against the acceptance actually gets in the way of us living and us having this wonderful, beautiful life. And it can be a big barrier for a lot of folks.
And you think about what happens when we recognize areas of uncertainty, or we recognize areas that are outside of our control. It's our natural human state to try and find a way to control it. And so worry is one of those things that we do. And the thing about worry is that it can be so reinforcing on itself. You worry about something, and then everything turns out all right, okay, good enough. And your brain learns, it turned out okay because I worried.
Right.
And so there's this reinforcement cycle that, like, I need to worry. If I don't worry, bad things might happen.
Yeah.
And so getting out of that cycle can be difficult, too.
How are you supporting clients? Just to talk about worry for a little bit here. How are you supporting clients in getting out of that cycle?
Oftentimes it's a conversation about what I just said, that like our brains are reinforced by the worry that we do, and kind of encouraging them to experiment with this idea that they don't have control. Like the joke about magical thinking meaning that we believe our thoughts have power. So you'll see this sometimes with people that have anxiety or OCD, where it's like you say something out loud, something bad might happen. Or you jinxed it. That's a magical thinking thing. So the other side of magical thinking can be like, well, if you think your words and thoughts have power for bad things to happen, why don't we think about our words and power having the capacity for good things to happen? And the joke I would make would be, why don't you think of the lottery numbers, and then we'll win the lottery? Because you have that power. And so recognizing we don't have that much power. And that can be hard to accept, that we don't have control over everything. And talking back and forth about what that is like, to recognize our limits of control, good or bad.
Yeah, there can be a real surrender is the word that I like to interchange with acceptance. It's so hard to get to that place, and it also can be really freeing. I think when we are able to orient towards acceptance or orient towards surrender, because there are things, of course, that we have control over, right? Like, I drove my car here this morning to record this podcast. I stopped and got some coffee for us on the way, right? Like, that is within my control. What's out of my control is something else happening to me, right? Like maybe someone swerved in the lane and could have hit me, right? But if I'm spending all my time worrying about that happening, then I'm not really present in my life, right?
So yeah, recognizing areas that we do have control, recognizing areas that we do have choice, and shifting from this mindset of what if. Anxiety loves to live there. Well, what if this bad thing happened? Like you said, what if somebody swerved and hit my car? And then we have worry. And then we have anxiety because we have this what if. And thinking about how to shift what if to like even if. Even if somebody swerved and hit my car, I would be able to handle that. And so this idea of the opposite of uncertainty is not certainty. And that's what we naturally urge ourselves to go towards. Well, I want certainty. That is not the opposite of uncertainty. The opposite of uncertainty is self-trust. So even if this bad thing happened, I could handle it. I've got support. I've got everything I need within me to handle whatever problem might come up next. That, to me, is the opposite of uncertainty.
That's great, Heidi. Yeah, self-trust. Yeah. Well, and I think it's so empowering, right, when we can trust ourselves to handle whatever life throws at us. right? So I know I share with clients a lot of times is like anxiety is an overestimation of a perceived threat of some kind, right? And then an underestimation of our ability to cope with whatever it is.
Yes.
And so what we're working on with clients is that empowerment lens of like, hey, what are times in your life when you have been through something hard? How have you gotten through that? Where is your resiliency? You know, we talk a lot about hope on this podcast, and I think that is so hopeful to find the pockets of resiliency to encourage and equip our clients with the skills, with the support, with the accountability that they need to be able to cope with life's hardships, stressors, trauma, whatever might be thrown their way.
Highlight in them the ability that they already have, and highlight in them that, like the fun saying of like, you've made it through every bad day you've ever had.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you've made it through unscathed. Doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. It wasn't hard. What resilience means is that you came through it. And if it's changed you, that could be good.
Yeah.
But this idea that like perfection is not the purpose of life. We're not looking to get through every single day without hardship. That is not realistic.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing you say is that acceptance really allows for permission to have a posture of surrender, right? To embrace uncertainty and also to embrace imperfection.
Yes.
Right? Because that is life. And the more that we struggle against kind of this embracing, I think the more pain and suffering it leads to. And of course, the possibilities of what that actually tangibly could look like for folks is so unique to their experience. But when we struggle against that acceptance, it does lead to more pain and suffering. And then that's when we see clients show up in our offices.
Yes.
Yeah. Any last thoughts about acceptance? Any other like nuggets of wisdom that you like to share with your clients?
I talk a lot about this idea that holding acceptance in one hand, we can also have, in the other hand, hope. When we hold acceptance in one hand, we can also, in the other hand, hold change. So these things are not mutually exclusive. We don't have to say, if I accept things as they are, I don't have any hope for them changing. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's true.
Yeah.
I can accept things as they are and still be working towards change. I can accept things as they are and have hope for things to get better. And I think that that is a topic that I talk about a lot in my room. And I think that those are the things that in people's minds, they feel mutually exclusive. They feel like they can't do both of those.
Yeah. And so holding both. Yeah, it's beautiful, Heidi. Would you like to offer our listeners an affirmation or some homework to take with them after today's episode?
An affirmation. When I accept what is, I make space for growth and healing and hope within myself.
Yeah, I love that. So beautiful. I'm going to take that with me today.
Thank you.
Maybe some homework is really just encouraging you all to contemplate, journal, think about what you have been resisting accepting. And I'm going to take this with me too, right? And challenge my own self with this. Because like Heidi referenced today, we can all benefit from orienting towards acceptance. So I just want you to think about that, right? Like getting curious about what you might be resisting accepting, and is there space for you to practice some acceptance in one area of your life? Thank you, Heidi, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you all to listening to the Becoming Anchored podcast. We'll see you next time. Take good care.